Hello and welcome, and of course you are tuned to TV 360 Nigeria, and we're continuing our coverage of the 2023 general election in Nigeria, specifically now the presidential and National Assembly election. Now, the highly anticipated election has begun in earnest. While accreditation and voting kicked off on time in some parts of Nigeria, some polling units and voting points witnessed delays of the arrival of election materials. Now, the front runners of the 2023 presidential election, Ballot of the ruling All Progressives Congress APC, Peter Obi of the Labour Party, Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party, and of course Rabiu Kwankwaso of the New Nigeria People's Party NNPP have all cast their ballots at their respective polling units in their states. The presidential hopefuls individually expressed confidence in emerging winner of the election. Of course, only one man will emerge winner at the end of the process, and the candidate can only be declared winner if that candidate scores a majority of valid votes cast and gets 25% of the votes cast in 2/3 of the country's states, 36 states now, and the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. Now, reports of turnout has been mixed so far. While large turnouts have been reported in some states, it's been low in some other states. So, of course, we can't fully tell for now what the overall turnout will be until after the process has been concluded. And I understand the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission is briefing at the moment in Abuja. So we go to Abuja now to take that briefing.
Delivered the hundreds of millions of ballot papers and result sheets that we are supposed to deliver for the election. But another contributory factor to the late opening of the polling units is actually the perennial insecurity in the country. For instance, we couldn't deploy early enough to Alawa in Shiroro local government area of Niger State. Bandits launched an attack, not necessarily on INEC officials, but in the area. So on the advice of the security agencies, we tarried a while. But I'm happy to say that we were able to deploy to Alawa, and voting in that location is ongoing as we speak. Similarly, in Oshimili local government area of Delta State, thugs attacked a polling unit and 2 beavers machines were lost in the process. But again, determined that election must continue, we were able to replace the stolen beavers machines, reinforce security, and voting continued in that location. Similarly, in Safana local government area of Katsina State, thugs attacked one of our voting locations and snatched 6 beavers machines. But again, we were able to recover and use the spare beavers machines and reinforce security for voting to continue in that location. Happily, the security agencies have recovered 3 of the beavers machines, but 3 are still held by the thugs. So in these locations, the target of attack was actually the beavers machines, no longer our ballot papers or ballot boxes, it's the beavers machines. But in the 2 instances, we were able to recover and continue with the process. But there are also other complaints we had from some political parties about the shortage of polling agents' tags, the identity tags. Nigerians may recall that for the first time we designed a portal and encouraged all political parties, as required by law, to nominate their polling agents. They never interacted with INEC face to face. And we harvested over 1.5 million nominations from political parties for agents at polling units level alone, and over 68,000 for collation at ward level, local government level, and the states, and 27 collation agents for the national collation as nominated by the 18 political parties. And we printed those cards and delivered them in the main to the states, where they were collected by the state chairmen of political parties. But not all the parties nominated agents for all the polling units. So we did what we are supposed to do. And if there are issues, then definitely these issues will not be from the commission. But we also realized, and that is why we created the portal, that parties would like to issue agents their own tags bearing only the logos of the party and the word agent written across. In this case, anybody can claim to be the agent of any political party at any level, resulting in some instances commotion during collation, where 2 or more agents will claim to represent a political party. And that's why we created the portal where they uploaded the names of the agents and the description of why they are going to serve as agents, as well as their photographs. And these cards were laminated and delivered to the states. One of the parties drew my attention to a letter. They said in one of the states, they were given a letter by INEC in the absence of the accreditation tag. But our officials at the polling unit level did not recognize those agents because they were not bearing the INEC accredited cards. I requested that gentleman to share a copy of that letter with me. He shared a copy of that letter, and it was clearly issued by his party, not by INEC. And when I drew his attention to it, he immediately deleted the message. So this is the clarification on the issue of agents. And I would still like to advise political parties that as we go into the concluding phase of this election, particularly when we go into collation of results, the Commission will insist that only INEC accredited collation agents will be admitted into the collation centers. Finally, there was an issue raised by some of the political parties, particularly at the polling unit level this morning. They said that in some instances, the logos of the political parties were on the ballot papers, but the acronyms of the political parties were not on the result sheets. I need to provide this important clarification. The process of producing the result sheet is more complicated than the production of the ballot paper. For result sheets at polling unit level, they are polling unit specific, and they are in several carbonized copies that the Commission will retain the top copies, the first 2 top copies, and then give each polling agent at polling unit level a copy, and 1 copy goes to the police. The process of producing the result sheet is a lot more complicated than the production of the ballot papers. So what we did on the result sheet was to provide 2 additional blank rows. And the purpose of these 2 additional blank rows is to accommodate any political party that we may be compelled to accommodate on the ballot paper by 11th hour judicial pronouncement. So those 2 additional rows are supposed to take care of that eventuality. So where you have a party on the ballot, but the logo is not on any of the result sheets, this can actually be added to the result sheets, for which rows have been provided accordingly. And the polling the presiding officers and the collection agents are authorized to accept and certify and stamp the insertion of political parties where this situation arises. There are also unfolding situations in Abia and Imo states. In Abia, deployment is taking place late to the polling units. The Commission is aware, but we are assuring voters in Abia state that no matter how late we deploy to the polling units, if voters are on the queue before 2:30, they will vote no matter how long it takes. So we are aware of the situation in Abia state. We are also aware of the situation in Imo state. Generally speaking, but specifically in respect of 4 local government areas: Okigwe, Uguta, Osu, and Olu local government areas. In the whole of Osu, we had issues in all the 11 wards. In the case of Olu, it's 6 wards out of 11. In the case of Okigwe, it's 5 wards out of 11. And in the case of Oguta, it's more widespread. I had a discussion with the Inspector General of Police this morning, as well as the military, and our officials have been escorted to all the 4 locations. I take it that voting would have commenced in some of these difficult places, but if it doesn't, then I want to assure voters in those locations that election will hold and they will not be disenfranchised. We are going to be making this briefing to Nigerians intermittent throughout the day. So we'll go and review the situation further. I hope in the next, what's the time now, Festus? Almost 1:30. Should we say 4:30? 4:30 will be here to provide Nigerians further updates. But this briefing is also supposed to be interactive. Yes, we may be journalists, but we are above all Nigerians. There are things you might have heard, things that we might have seen, reports that we might have read, that we wish to draw our attention to. In our situation room, we have several platforms. That is what is called the INEC Citizens Contact Center, ICCC, where Nigerians using different platforms also relate with the Commission, report situations, and we have been responding. But you'll understand that we are in the middle of an election. So if there are 1 or 2 questions or observations or suggestions, I would like to listen to them and respond to the questions before we go back to the situation room. Thank you very much.
The chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, giving updates now on the situation of things across the country and how voting is progressing. Of course, he did talk about attacks in some states, specifically like Delta State, for instance, where he said there were attacks, and there are some areas where beavers was actually some beavers machines now were stolen, and that the commission has been able to recover 2 or 3 or so, and that the thugs who stole them are still keeping the others, but that they've been able to get replacement. So it's really indeed a surprise that this would be happening. But let me at this point bring in Dayo Akintobi, who is a political affairs analyst. He joins us here in the studio to help us make sense of what the INEC chairman has been saying. Dio, thank you very much for coming on the program. You had the INEC chairman there, and what do you make of some of the things he said?
Well, for me, the big thing today that I think we should all celebrate is the fact that there was no postponement in this election. Think about it, the last two elections, 2019 and 2015, at the last minute, both those elections were postponed for a period of time. We didn't have that this time. So already we're ahead this election. We're doing better. Secondly, even the reports of violence here and there, Delta, Shiroro, one or two places that the chairman spoke about, those skirmishes were relatively minor compared to what we've had in the past. So I think all said and done, this election already is starting to take on the tenor of being a lot more successful than the immediate past ones we have done.
From what you have heard so far, what would be your assessment? I mean, it's like it's been a mixed bag.
It's been a mixed bag, but with more positives than drawbacks, actually, to tell you the truth. Even indications of where there may have been skirmishes, they're relatively minor. There's a lot of calm out there and peace, and that is a plus for INEC and for this administration to have organized elections that are going this well thus far. The prayer, of course, should be that it carries on like that throughout the day, particularly in the rural areas, the riverine areas, and the areas where logistically it's kind of challenging to get the materials, the personnel. One thing I've noticed is that Nigerians seem committed this particular election, that no matter what the challenges may be, everybody will vote. I spoke to someone earlier at one of the polling booths out in Lagos who said even if it takes 5 hours of standing in the hot sun, he will stay there until he casts his vote. So it seems to be that in as much as this is not a two-horse race, this election, to where the results are almost already predetermined, this election is really up in the air, and at this point, it's difficult to say that there's a clear-cut front runner among the four people. So the contest is relatively
the four of them are front runners.
The four of them are all the four of them are all front runners, but there's no front runner to the front runner.
Oh, okay.
so I think it has galvanized that passion in people to go out and support their particular candidate, because they recognize the fact that the competition is intense this time.
One recurrent theme that we have seen today is the issue of delays in the arrival of materials at polling units, and quite a number of polling units, even here in Lagos. I mean, I went around those delays. I saw them. There were places where voting didn't start until some 2 hours later or so, and then, you know, the INEC chairman had given every assurance that we were not going to have this logistics problem anymore, and you know, that it all ended with 2019, but we're still seeing these logistics challenges.
Well, remember, in addition to the typical conventional things that cause these log jams, we have two additional challenges this particular election. Number one is the cash crunch, and number two, of course, is the fuel scarcity. Those two things have a role to play in the ability to distribute materials, get workers, get INEC officials to the various polling units. In addition to the fact that the terrain is tough. I mean, roads are bad, there's traffic, there's all kinds of issues to contend with, especially when you're looking at rural Nigeria, where you have riverine areas, you have areas that are not relatively easily navigable. Then, of course, there's a Nigerian factor that creeps into everything, whereby things that should be in certain places at certain times are not there. Vehicles that should show up at certain times to pick up materials come late. So there's always been that specter of inefficiency. No matter how well INEC prepares, there's always that gremlin that will climb on top of the shoulder of the procedure and have a tendency to destabilize matters. So INEC's role is to try and minimize the disruptions to the process as much as possible. But I don't think in any part of the world, not even in advanced democracies, do you see that things run 100% perfect and there are no shortcomings or lapses here and there. So I would say that the sum total of the lapses and the shortcomings is determined by the overall outcome. As long as these minor lapses don't play a major role, for example, in stopping the voting completely at a polling station because the election materials didn't arrive at all. If they arrive late, Chairman has said in his briefing a short while, even if the election materials arrive at 4 p.m., they guarantee that every single person in the queue there will get to cast their vote.
Yeah.
So let's continue. The jury is still out. Let's continue to wait.
So let's talk about turnout. I mean, it's been a major issue in our elections in this country since 1999. The highest turnout we've had in this country, I think, would be sometime in 2003 when we did slightly over 60%. But from 2003 to this time, we've actually been going down. The last election, 2019, I think among the poorest, we did somewhere around maybe 39% or so, or probably less than that. Then you look at this election. You just talked about the problem with the cash crunch and then petrol scarcity. We can't deny the fact that as a result of the cash crunch and petrol scarcity, quite a number of people were not able to travel to the locations where they registered, because in Nigeria, some people prefer to vote in their hometowns rather than in places where they live that is far away from their hometowns. But this time, do you think this twin challenge of cash crunch and petrol scarcity would probably affect the turnout in this election?
Those two things are a double whammy, body blows that we really didn't need, especially as you've described that the trend is on a downward spiral in terms of voter participation. I would say that the reason in the past that voter participation has been low is because some people have the notion that either their votes won't count or they are disillusioned by the people who've presented themselves for office, so there's no interest and they wonder, why should I bother to go? But this election is different. Like I said, it's not a two-horse race. It's 4 front runners, and each of them have passionate, rabid groups of supporters who are completely and totally aligned with the vision and ready to do anything to galvanize their candidate into office. So I think that passion is going to play out and reflect in the participation of people at the polls. So I think we'll see a reversal of that downward spiral this particular outing, where voter participation will be more because, first of all, there are more options by way of candidates. Some of them are more attractive than what we've been offered in the past. And also, there's the notion that this election can usher in change, that Nigeria is at a crossroads. Nigeria is at a crossroads where it's a make or break time. So everybody feels a personal sense of responsibility that I need to play my part to assure Nigeria's future. And the only way to do that is by coming out to vote. So I think we'll see a reversal in the trends. I mean, I was out there earlier today going around the polling booths, and turnout is mixed in Lagos. There are some places that were scanty, and there are some places that were queues were all the way out the door. So it's a mixed bag, but when it's all said and done, I think by and large we'll have a better turnout this time.
All right, let's just quickly take a short break. We'll come back and still continue this discussion on turnout, and of course we'll discuss some other issues and bring you more updates now from across the country. Stay with us, don't go away.